Thanks for watching The Thought Criminals, named after the resistance to the totalitarian thought police of George Orwell's 1984, which we now refer to as being woke. I'm your host, Rachel Alexander. I'm a weekly contributor to Townhall and other sites and the editor of Intellectual Conservative. And this is my mall, Ralph Benko, who worked in or with the Reagan W. Bush and Trump White Houses. He's a weekly columnist for Newsmax, co-author of the Capitalist Manifesto, and co-founder and executive chairman of the 185,000 member Capitalist League Facebook group. Well, today we're going to tell you about a really sleazy scheme that's going on in the US Senate race here in Arizona, where Attorney General Mark Brnovich is trying to defeat Mark Kelly, Democrat Mark Kelly. But in the meantime, there's some nasty shenanigans going on in the Republican primary. And then we're going to discuss three left-wingers who recently died, who I have never heard of, but Ralph can tell you all about them. So to begin, as you see, I'm wearing my Brnovich t-shirt. He and I go back a very long ways to when I used to work next to him in the Attorney General's office and play pranks on him. So basically, he's running against a couple of billionaire-funded candidates, and one of them is a guy named Blake Masters, who's funded by an out-of-state Silicon Valley billionaire. He has no record in office, a very young person, just decided to run, and we think he's behind spreading this rumor that Brnovich was been hanging out with our Rhino Maricopa County recorder, Stephen Richer, who claims that there is no election fraud. He said there's no election fraud in the 2020 election here in Arizona. And he said, based on that, he has started a club for a PAC for Republican election fraud deniers. And so you have these major conservative sites that have been running these stories on Brnovich hanging out with this Richer. Well, here's the truth, okay? Brnovich speaks to many political events. He's asked to come speak to all kinds of organizations. And there was this businessy type of group that he chose to go speak to. And if you go to their homepage, they sound like they're very conservative, all about free enterprise, getting the government out, blah, blah, blah. No brainer, right? So Brnovich was speaking to this event and Richer happened to be in the audience. It's a small event in somebody's backyard and Richer's standing a few feet away from him, listening to him speak. That's all it was. Well, it's even worse. And this is why I decided to write about it, because I thought it was just so appalling. This Blake Masters, who we believe leaked the information, and you're about to see why we think it's him, he spoke to the exact same group. We have photos, which I put in my article, of him speaking with the same Richer sitting just a few feet away from him as well. And in another photo, they're standing in a long line together with their arms around each other's like this. So this isn't the first time this Masters has pulled one of these maneuvers. Another time was when Trump was here in Arizona a few weeks ago speaking at a rally, and Masters tweeted a photo of him with one of his associates bragging about how Trump's here in Arizona for a rally today and he wants nothing to do with Brnovich. He wouldn't let him, around, right? Well, earlier that morning, Brnovich was at the airport greeting President Trump and tweeted out a photo of them hanging out together. Masters has never removed his tweet, even though it's completely inaccurate. So I'm going to add one other thing onto that as well. This Masters, if you look him up on the internet, you will discover that a bunch of left-wing news sources say that he doesn't believe there was election fraud during the 2020 election himself. Whereas Brnovich, on the other hand, has been one of the most proactive conservatives getting to the bottom of whether there really was election fraud or not. He is about, and I can tell you this right now, he is very close to finally releasing the results of his investigation into the 2020 election here in Maricopa County. So, and I've got more instances in my article where I list where he has fought, Democratic Secretary of State Katie Hobbs over her efforts to thwart election integrity efforts. She's filed 12 bar complaints against him and his staff over his efforts. So he has an outstanding record, and I don't like people smearing him and pretending that he's hanging out with election fraud deniers when nothing could be further from the truth.
And Rachel, I can prove your case for you that actually can prove your case that Brnovich doesn't hang out with election fraud deniers. I can't prove that Blake Masters, and I'd like you to clarify, you have a suspicion that Blake Masters is the one who's spreading these rumors, but I have proof that whoever's spreading them, it's not true. And would you like that proof on the record for all to hear?
You have proof that what's not true?
That Brnovich does not hang around with election fraud deniers. Would you like?
Because he hangs out with us.
He hangs out with me, and I'm an election fraud. He doesn't hang out with me, and I'm an election fraud denier. Therefore, since I'm an election fraud denier and he doesn't hang out with me, QED, he clearly doesn't hang out with election fraud deniers, because I'm one and he doesn't hang out with me. And you are an election fraud perpetuator, myth perpetuator, and he does hang out with you. So I'd say
horribly lacking in logic argument I have ever heard.
Thank you. Thank you. I always aim for the best. So there you go. Now, Blake Masters did send out a tweet claiming that Brnovich did not associate with Donald Trump when Trump came to Arizona. And we have the proof positive that he met Trump at the airport, got their picture taken, and he bragged on it by putting it on his own Twitter account. So the misinformation that Masters was spreading about that in order to try to drive a wedge between the remaining 4 or 5 Trump admirers in Arizona and Brnovich, trying to deny Brnovich those 4 or 5 votes. Okay.
I just have to point out that is really inaccurate, considering Carrie Lake, who identifies herself as the Trump Republican candidate in the gubernatorial race, she is polling higher than all of her GOP competitors combined.
Okay, well, that's correlation does not prove causation. However, I just saw that Mr. Trump has retracted his endorsement of Mo Brooks, who has been tanking in a series of Trump-endorsed candidates who've then tanked.
And he did that because Mo Brooks denies that there was election fraud.
Well, that's what Trump always has a story for everything, and so he does. Some of us believe that he's retracted because he doesn't want it to be known that his endorsement has not been a political plus for a number of candidates. And if he wants to be the kingmaker, he just can't keep endorsing.
For the overwhelming number of candidates, it has been beneficial if you crunch the numbers.
Well, I haven't crunched the numbers, but I'll bet you have. And so I know you heart Donald Trump, and so I'm not going to get between you and.
I don't know why you have to bring in like the sarcasm. I mean, to me it seems just a pretty honest assessment whether you either think Trump has done a good job or you don't, and it doesn't mean you have to be worship Trump or you have to be a fanboy or all this extraneous stuff. You either think he's done a good job and deserves to be put back in office, or you don't. I mean, to me it's a very simple logical way to look at it. You don't need to put all your emotion into it.
There you go being logical again. This is politics. Logic has nothing to do with politics, and you should know that by now, since you've been in politics for 20, 30 years. So there you go. Never let the facts get in the way of a good story. Rule 1 of journalism. So
I think there there is some aspect of logic in politics. It's not everything. I mean, you've got all the people out there who vote for somebody based on just their looks and charisma. So that, sure, that's not logical. But a lot of it, you can look at it in that framework. Like that's how I like looking at COVID. You know, I think COVID is something that really, you know, screams to be looked at using logic.
Okay, but let's go back to Blake Masters for a minute, for just a minute, and that is Blake Masters co-authored a book called 0 to 1, which the lead author was Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel was one of the original investors in Facebook, and he actually just recently resigned from the board of Facebook. He sold his shares at a whopping profit, $1 billion profit, a long time ago. If he had held on to it, it would have been 10 billion. But you know, I think he originally invested something like $500,000 in it, and took a $500 million or $1 billion profit, and good for him. Peter was one of the originators of PayPal. That's how he made his original stake. And someone just wrote a book about him, talking about what a contrarian he is and how unusual he is. He addressed the Republican National Committee, the first out of the closet gay guy to do that when Trump was getting nominated, because he was a big, huge Trump fan. Unclear whether he still is or not, but he has been backing the he's been backing the reactionaries all over the country. So J.D. Vance, the hillbilly elegy guy in Ohio, Thiel is spending a lot of money supporting his campaign, and Blake Masters was his right-hand man in one of his investment funds, if memory serves, and was the co-author of 0 to 1. So he is Thiel's chosen candidate. Okay, he had no political experience prior to this, at least none that I was aware of. And Peter has basically blessed him with a huge independent super PAC spending, and plus using all of his social capital in Silicon Valley to raise substantial sums for Blake Masters. So let's be really clear about this. Blake Masters is Peter Thiel's candidate. He's a political creature of Peter Thiel. I don't know, actually, I have no idea what he stands for. I have no idea what his political principles are. I'm skeptical because Thiel tends to back cranks, guys like J.D. Vance. They're not conservatives; they're reactionaries, and I don't know. It used to be that Peter was prominently known as a libertarian, and now he has shifted his posture to be extremely anti-liberty and extremely kind of anti-populist, and just is going around backing reactionary candidates. So I don't really think that you need to get all that exercise over Blake Masters, because what he is, you know, Peter Thiel is going to spend a lot of money running advertisements for him. But I frankly think that the people of Arizona are way too smart to fall for that. And Brnovich has a really solid record of public service. He's been distinguished in terms of his elections and his service in elective office as Attorney General. I don't agree with all of his policies, but I do know this. In Brnovich's case, what you see is what you get. And Brnovich is straight up, he's honest, he'll tell you what he's thinking, and he does what he promises to do. And so for people who are interested in having somebody who has got a great track record of hardworking public service and high degree of integrity, doing what he promises to do, following through on his promises, check out his campaign promises, check out what he's promising the voters I am 100% confident that he will do everything in his power to deliver on all of his campaign promises. And he's a conservative, even though he's, a little too enthusiastic about stopping immigrants. I think you know me. I'm
immigrants, illegal immigrants.
Okay.
And much of the focus these days isn't even on the illegal immigrants, it's on criminal illegal immigrants. And I should add on to your good description of what's going on with him. He would never leak a dishonest story to conservative media outlets like the one that was leaked about him. That's his character.
Okay.
He would not
Yeah.
do that.
Right. He fights clean. He fights hard, but he fights clean. And but just don't hang the most recent. And by the way, it was a plant, not a leak, about him hanging around with some rhino on Blake Masters. We don't know that. We suspect that because Blake Masters has done that has used misinformation, proven misinformation in the past. So you're naturally suspicious of him. But fair play. Okay, you suspect that he planted that false rumor. But the other thing is I don't care. First of all, even if it were true, and it's not true, because I'm an election fraud denier and he doesn't hang around with me, if he was hanging out with some elected official or he was at a meeting with some elected official who he has a political disagreement with,
well, you don't think it's a big deal, but I hear it. I have people bashing me on Facebook all the time over that plant that was done. I hear it. I get bombarded with messages of people just saying how evil Brnovich is, blah, blah, blah. So I felt like it needed to get out there. And the other thing I wanted to say,
no, you did the right thing. You did the right thing on dispelling that fake news. Okay, that's high integrity journalism on your part to say this isn't true, this is a mischaracterization, this is misinformation. But just let me indict whoever did it a little bit harder. Back in the days of Joe McCarthy, this was called guilt by association. Okay, and guilt by association is wrong, it's immoral, it's unethical. If you say somebody who you have a political disagreement with, therefore you're a hypocrite, or therefore you secretly share their views, that's just nonsense and it's dirty pool. So whoever's trying to slur Brnovich by implying that because he was at a meeting with this guy who didn't believe that election fraud changed the outcome in Arizona or the country, hey, that is McCarthyite tactics, and I find it deplorable.
And what it reminded me of was that backyard really struck me. It looked like a backyard of a party that I have been at, and some of them was in Brnovich's own backyard, where Brnovich would host the Federal Society of Phoenix parties. And we have all types of leftists that show up there. I remember one where liberal Ninth Circuit Court Justice Andy Hurwitz was at there. He was speaking at it, and I specifically went up to him and I ribbed him about some decision. Now, what if somebody had caught me on camera talking to this leftist justice? They could have done the exact same thing. And Ralph knows this, but some people don't know this. I know Brnovich going back to 2000. I have known him very closely for 22 years, and he has never done me wrong. And, I have a long memory and I can carry grudges, and he has never lied to me. He's never led me down the wrong path. That's a long time to know somebody. So I want to end this segment with telling you something funny. I think I told you this, Ralph, already. My article got some notoriety with the Arizona Democrat Party. They actually issued a press release about it. And they incorrectly said that Brnovich must have had to, call in some favors to get a former colleague of his to write about this. And I thought, actually, that's just misreporting. I mean, he didn't call in a favor to get me to write about it. I wanted to write about it. I suggested it because I was so sick masters saying these things about him that just weren't accurate. So anyway, let's pivot to your interesting article about 3 dead people I have never heard of, and I do want to get into how you say that Saul Alinsky did not dedicate his book to Satan, and that has been heavily disputed.
Well,
but
you can't. It's indisputable. First of all, it was the dedication says on the dedication page to Irene. So unless you can prove to me that Irene, that Satan has another name, Irene, then you could flip it open and you can see the dedication right there. Number one. Number two, there were 3 epigrams, 3 short blurbs in the beginning of the book, one by Rabbi Hillel, which is actually on Alinsky's grave. He lived by this: where there are no men, be thou a man, a counsel of integrity, by a Jewish divine, by one of the greatest Jewish rabbis. Saul was Jewish. He was agnostic. He was not observant, but he was never never an atheist, and he was very deeply moved by Rabbi Hillel's "Where there are no men, be thou a man." Number 2, the second epigram was from Thomas Paine, who said, let them call me rebel. I would rather have I would rather be tortured by devils than give up my integrity. I'm paraphrasing, but you could go to Rules for Radicals and you can read it. And so that was also an anti-satanic thing. And the third one was Saul being provocative, like he did very well. He was a provocateur. And he said, an over-the-shoulder acknowledgement to Lucifer. And by the way, both John Calvin and Martin Luther, the founders of Protestantism, had wrote in their theologies that anybody who conflates Lucifer and Satan is a biblical ignoramus. Lucifer was not Satan. Satan was not Lucifer. They're 2 completely different characters.
I've heard both sides of that. And you know what? Maybe we need to have a whole show getting into that, because there's an argument that they were the same.
No, there is no argument that they were the same. There is one reference.
There are people on both sides. I'm not going to let you get away with that. And as for your epigraphs, okay, I think saying that he didn't dedicate the book to Satan is a matter of semantics. Okay, it's not a dedication.
It's not dedicated, and it's not to Satan. And when Winston Churchill, on the eve of the German invasion of Operation Barbarossa, turned to his secretary and said, if Hitler invaded hell, I would at least say a few kind words about the devil on the floor of the House of Commons, which did not make Winston Churchill a Satanist. Okay, what we're talking about is being provocative and kind of sticking it to the uptight bourgeoisie. I asked Irene, to whom Rules for Radicals, rest in peace, was dedicated. I said, hey, this was, what was Saul doing with this dedication? And she said he knew exactly what he was doing. He was being provocative.
Okay. So for our 1 million viewers, I'm going to read exactly what he wrote. And
yes, please do.
They can decide. He wrote, yes. Lest we forget.
Wait. Put it in context.
This is an epigraph on the beginning of his book.
Epigram, the third epigram. I want you to read the first and the second one, and then read the third one so people can appreciate it in context.
Okay, let me just get this one first. Lest we forget at least an over-the-shoulder acknowledgement,
right?
The very first radical,
right?
All our legends, mythology, and history, and who to know where mythology leaves off and history begins, or which is which. The first radical known to man who rebelled against the establishment and did it so effectively that he at least won his own kingdom, Lucifer.
Yes, that was Saul being provocative. And by the way, I will pour a little kerosene on your fire. Okay, in his final interview which a 25,000 word interview published in Playboy, although I'm sure he didn't know where it was going to be published. No, that's how Playboy was. I know, we just read it for the articles. We never looked at
You
the
should
pictures.
watch the series that just came out called Secrets of Playboy, and you will never want anything to do with.
Just, I knew Ned Pattison, who had a long interview in Playboy. They interviewed him and then they sold it to Playboy. He had no idea. So Saul was not a prude, but he was also not promiscuous, and he was a faithful soul. My point is, they asked him when he died where he wanted to go. He said, I want to go to hell because those are my kind of people. So no. He was basically saying he likes to hang out with a rank and file, not the holier than thou kind of people. It was not an embrace of Satanism. It was not an embrace of evil. Saul Alinsky spent his life fighting for justice, and justice is the mark of
his version of justice.
His version of justice was to say that when the shopping centers in Chicago refused to hire Black people, that people
always bring up what he did for race, but you don't bring up everything else that he did. Okay, fighting for Black people. People on the right, pastors on the right, fought for Black people.
Yes,
there's a lot of people who fought for Black people. Saul Alinsky, that was one aspect of him. There were many other aspects of him that had nothing to do with helping minorities.
So the author of the definitive, biography of Saul Alinsky, Sandy Horwitz, was one of the other two people who passed on, who I gave an acknowledgement to in my column. And if you would read his biography of Saul Alinsky, you will discover that Saul Alinsky dedicated his life to fighting for minorities, not just Blacks, but also ethnic minorities in the back of the yards of the meat packers of Chicago. And he was called upon by Cardinal Montini, who went on to become Pope Paul VI, to train the Vatican how to confront and eliminate the Italian Communist Party that was making inroads in northern Italy. So when you talk about all these other things that Saul Alinsky did, why don't you read?
You've convinced me. I mean, the fact I even know this much about Alinsky is because you always bring him up on our show, so I have to know a little bit. I'm nowhere near your level of knowledge.
Read the biography.
No, you've convinced me. I'm gonna read it, that whole thing. And again, we still haven't dedicated a whole show to Alinsky. And after I've read it, then you know what? I'll probably write about it as well.
Good, bring it on. So anyway, so farewell to Jim Turner, who was one of Nader's raiders, who wrote what Time magazine called the most critical book about a federal agency ever written, about a government agency, the Food and Drug Administration, ever written. Okay, this is a man of the left, but he was a libertarian leftist. So Jim Turner passed on about 3 months ago. Sandy Horwitz, who wrote the definitive Alinsky biography, passed on about 3 weeks ago. And in the course of trying to let Saul's widow, Irene, who I've been out of touch with for a few years, we used to be telephone friends, and I went to visit her in Cape Cod a couple of times, keeping her identity secret because she was totally apolitical and she was a private kind of person. But it was she would tell me stories about Saul and her and Saul, and we used to chat on a regular basis, and then we lost touch, and I discovered that she herself passed on August 6th, 2020. So 3 great leftists who were ideological adversaries of mine, but I cherish their friendship. And you can I guess you Christians would call that hating the sin but not the sinner. I really enjoyed my relationship with these people, no matter how much I disagreed with them ideologically. But I also want to let you know there are some good people on the left, and you should get out more and encounter some of the sort of left-leaning libertarians who are not statist and not socialist. They exist.
Well, why do you just assume that? I mean, my friend I talk to all day long is a lefty.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, so
I get out.
I hope that when he passes on, he'll write a column paying tribute to him the way I did with my three friends, Jim Turner.
Well, that would be kind of
Over.
sad because
And
he's
I
7
agree
years
with that.
younger than me.
Oh, well, then let's hope that he outlives us both.
All right. Well, I think that does it. That winds us up for today. And so with that note, we will say thanks for watching and see you next week.
See you next week. Thanks, Rachel.